Daryl, good to see you again, man.
Great to see you,
Got to
Calvin.
catch up with you next time you're in DC.
Absolutely.
Getting on your calendar.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for spending a little time just to talk with us and all the folks that will watch this video. As you know, we have a group of sort of 35 to 45-year-old real estate professionals within Urban Land Institute that want to hear the insights of a leader like yourself.
Oh, I thought you were going to let me be that age again.
If you can figure that out,
Yeah.
we would love for you to tell us.
That's
too.
why I came here now.
So you've been in the business, in this industry for 35 years
Yes.
at least. I mean, you have a company now that's managing thousands of units. You're buying hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property. You're on different boards. Before we start talking about your work life, how do you choose which activities you do outside of work?
That's a great question, Calvin. I think it starts, number one, with what activities really support the business. And so I've been involved very much in ULI. I've been a trustee and involved as a vice chairman. Also National Multifamily Housing Council. Those are the two trade associations I probably spend the most time with. And then I'm on three different corporate boards. And then I was for many years on the AAU basketball board of Southern California because both my kids are basketball players, and I'm a former basketball player, so that's one of the things that I do community-based. But I try to limit it to the things that, regarding corporate boards. I'm on the board of a company that's involved in the single-family rental space, and that's a space that's very, very interesting relative to the apartment business and what goes on, and particularly as it relates to affordable housing. So I try to tailor my outside involvements to be tied to either activities, business-wise, or things that I enjoy personally.
Wow. I don't know how you do all of that in your 25th hour of the day, I suppose.
No, I just have to stay organized.
So now you told me earlier about a trick that you use when thinking about how many different activities you can do outside of work.
Well, you have to look and figure out the logistics of it. And one of the things that I do when I know that I am at capacity, I do not add another one until I delete an existing activity. And I think that's really important. And certainly to allow yourself to have balance. I mean, I certainly enjoy other things, playing golf and tennis and things like that. So, you have to have escapes in addition to being focused, 24/7 on business, because you have to rejuvenate yourself. And it's, as you get older, you learn better how to pace yourself.
Let me tell you, if you followed me on Instagram, I put a picture of me icing my knees after playing basketball last weekend for the first time in 9 months. So
well, I play twice a week, and I've never stopped.
I'm trying to be more like you in all levels. See, there you go. So, you're doing a lot of things, and you've done a lot of things. I mean, you founded multiple companies, whether it's Capri Capital. It was an $8 billion platform at the time. It's probably larger now. When you founded that with Quentin, you obviously founded, these series of businesses that really sort of all fit in an affordable housing, multifamily platform. One of the things that we're trying to think about as 35 to 45-year-olds is not only how to grow ourselves individually, but how do we innovate and be creative in a pretty mature industry? You seem like you've been able to do that on multiple occasions in different parts of the industry. Can you give us some insights on how you do that?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I've learned is to focus on areas where there are either major problems or where there isn't the flow of capital or there isn't the investment. I mean, for instance, in the early 90s, my former partner, Quentin Primo, and I, we saw this institutional capital flowing in, developing countries, in Brazil and other places, Russia and all the so-called BRIC companies.
Right.
And we started going to U.S. pension funds and saying, hey, there are underserved markets in the U.S. They're in South Central Los Angeles, and remember we had the riots in Detroit, in Los Angeles in 1992. So it was after that period, and we just really went out and we didn't make the case about, well, this is the right thing to do. We made the case, look, there's people need housing in these communities. People shop in these communities, and certainly, one of my old Big Ten friends, Magic Johnson, was also part of that initiative. That
Right.
when we really just tried to make the business case as to why to do that. Now, many of those communities had been invested in 30 or 40 years earlier or 50 years earlier. So investment in those communities wasn't totally new because they had gotten built. And B, people were investing in other communities. So we just had to bring the spotlight on where capital had stopped flowing and coming up with the reasons why it should continue to flow. I think today in our affordable investment business, one of the things that we find is that when we looked at that space is that most affordable apartment communities, it was a very highly fragmented industry where a lot of small operators that didn't necessarily bring the strategic best practices of the apartment industry to those sectors. And so we've done a lot of investing in technology to help us on management and different things like that. But more importantly, we take a real holistic view to investing in affordable communities, not only investing in brick and mortar, but we do things like after school programs and things like that, where it invests in our residents as well. And so that's a little bit different. And, so you can always bring innovation to a sector that seemingly is very, very mature. And what we have found that some of the things that we do, the services at our communities, translate to higher occupancy, lower turnover, all the key metrics. And one of the things that we measure these things. We bring analytics to the table to try things and see if they're, economically advantageous to do.
Now, it's interesting when I listen to some of the things, and you said you use this sort of holistic approach, it reminds me that you're from a small place called Detroit, Michigan. I'm from a small place called Brooklyn, New York, so I feel sort of the energy coming from growing up in sort of a urban environment with some challenges and being able to make it, in an industry that doesn't have, frankly, a lot of folks who come from those type of backgrounds.
Yes.
What are your insights on what got you from, just a kid in Detroit with a dream to, the sort of high level that you're at now?
Well, I think number one is the great parents, which I was blessed with, and also, parents that never received much in the way of education, but that was a very strong value in our house was education. But in addition to education, the exploring. I mean, my dad made sure every year we got somewhere out the city of Detroit, to see something different. And, very often if you're a child, if you can visualize something, you could potentially do it. And, I still continue to do that. And very interestingly, my 12-year-old daughter was asking me about, she was thinking that she might want to take Mandarin because she likes to talk, and she found that there's 1 billion people that she could talk to that speaks Mandarin. And I said, you ought to do it. And so I said, if at your age and where you are, you ought to just think about traveling all over the world and continue to grow and spend time in all these countries and and do that. And this was about 6 or 8 months ago. And then, and I said, yeah, if I were starting over, I would kind of do a lot of that. And then she looked at me, she said, well, why can't you do it now? I'm like, I don't know. And so I recently, based on that, I took a trip to Singapore and Shanghai with, for the first time to try to raise institutional capital.
So should I ask you to say something in Mandarin right now?
No.
Now, this is going to be a terrible segue, but it is a segue. So you talked about kind of how you're, kind of coaching your daughter in terms of how she should look at her trajectory in sort of life. And there's some parallels to, again, our kind of group of 35 to 45-year-olds who are, leaders in companies now, whether they're the CEO or they're now management. And they're thinking about both how to manage millennials, but also things like succession planning. So do you have any insights on how you think about succession planning? And the
Well,
like?
I think it's important for every organization, and particularly if it's a public organization, private organization, because we're the baby boomers are all hitting their late 50s, 60s, 70s, and many companies, certainly our investors ask about that. So number one, it's driven by investors, whether it's a private company or a public company, and they wonder, we're making investments that we look to hold 10 to 15 years. So it's really important. And so one of the things that I've been increasingly more focused on in my company, and actually relatively aggressive on, is creating more opportunities for my rising stars. And we're blessed to have 4 or 5 really talented people who lead major parts of the business, and we've just, and so recently I've been giving more and more opportunities to that group. Because,
now, what would be an example of that?
Well, a perfect example is me and the senior partners. There are 4 of us, and one is in the 40s, the rest are 50 and older. And we were going through different topics, and one was social media. And all of a sudden I said, guys, why are we talking about this?
Right.
We don't do as much of this. And so we have a group of people who really know that. And so we sat down with that same group of our up and coming superstars and say, look, you guys own this, and just tell us what it costs, but the website, all this stuff you own. And and increasingly, for instance, our property management business, our leader is in his early 30s who runs that business. Wow. And, he comes with ideas on things with social media, and I'm like, great, let's just give it a try. But what we're trying to do is take people, and his name is Nicholas Dunlap, and he is one of my stars, and take people like Nicholas, because one day he could lead this company. I mean, he is a leader now, but he will continue to grow. And the important thing that that my generation of leaders have to do is step back more, delegate more. And, I spend more of my time now as a coach and facilitator, and I still lead the organization, but I'm continuing to push more leadership down to that next level. Because again, we won't build any kind of succession if we're holding the reins on too tight.
Right.
I learned a long time ago, someone told me about leadership, and they said, there's generally 3 things that can happen when you delegate. One is they're going to do exactly the same thing, and whatever the outcome is going to be the same outcome. Sometimes they're going to do something different, and it may have a better outcome. And then sometime they're going to do something that's different. It's going to have a bad outcome. But you've got to allow, when you really think about it, 2 out of 3 of those possibilities are good. So why not do it? Statistically, because they're going to either do what you did or do something better. They may, but we learn a lot more from our failures than we do our successes.
Absolutely.
So, having people delegating and having people make decisions, and not bad ones. I mean, we certainly, decisions that will impact the solvency of our firm, they're certainly made at a higher
bet
level.
the farm delegation.
Right. But you have to do it appropriately so people can learn.
Another kind of people-related question. As you look at all the businesses you founded, at least in the conversations we've had in my crack research team made up solely of me, there's always been key partners, whether it's Quentin Primo, the McKinley Alliance that you have now. It seems like you've made some very strategic and smart decisions to partner with certain people. How are you making those decisions?
Well, having partners in a business is, number one, it's you're talking about people that have exactly the same values as you. I mean, that you, and also have very high standards. Quentin Primo and I were partners for 16 years, and, Quentin and I were very, very different, but, grew up in a similar way, different socioeconomic background, but also just had the standards. So we never, when you're compromising standards, that's probably, and also integrity. I mean, those 2 things. But, Albert Perez and I started who was the CEO of McKinley Properties. Albert and I started out in banking together in 1981. And Albert and I were the two. He was the first Latino they hired in real estate. I was the first African American. And we sat next to each other and we created this bond. And Albert grew up very similar to the way that I did, had very strong parents who had lost everything when they had come over from Cuba. And so we had that bond where, the thing about whether it's Albert or Quentin or, the great thing about having partners like that is the most important thing, we have the same view of what our property should be about relative to our residents. It's, in our business today, I tell all of our people, it's about our residents. If we take care of our residents and our properties, everything else will matter. And that means, and that's a cultural mentality where, it's one of being humble. And, one of the challenges I saw, you get back to innovation in the affordable business is, candidly, you have a lot of owners in that space that say, well, because they're a Section 8 resident, they don't deserve very much. And see, we view that our Section 8 residents are just as important as any other. I mean, if we were operating a luxury building, and you have to have that mentality in our space. And when we, that's the important thing about partners or having, that value.
So how do you find, do you have a process in mind in terms of finding a partner that has the same philosophical bent? How do you do that?
Well, and you mentioned those two, Albert Perez and Quentin Primo. These are people who had been longtime friends, and certainly, but I look at, I have three partners in my company today, June Sakamoto, John Williams, and Ron Jeskowitz, all of whom I've had long-standing associations with, and who we all share the same values, and you have to, have that, and there can never be a question of, integrity or something like if we have an issue that we think we need to have more security at a property, there's never an argument about, well, are we going to mess up our budget? We're going to do what is right for that resident. If we have to make an investment that makes our residents safer, happier, whatever, we do it. And it's not a thing of, well, we should cut corners to make some more money. We just don't think like that.
So that question was about choosing partners. How do you apply that mentality to choosing sort of key employees?
Well, it's a similar process. You want to have employees who buy into the mission. Our mission is we provide quality housing to the working class segment, which typically ranges from $25,000 to $60,000 a year in our communities. We provide quality for that segment, and that's what we do, and we try to do it very, very well. And everyone who works for us has to buy into that mission. You get, and part of that is, respect for our residents and the fact that, we are not, I say we don't own these apartments. These are our residents' homes, and we are the fiduciary for their homes, and we are really, we're sort of incubating their American dream. And when we think about it like that, where there's a mission, I think it brings people together, and it's easy to ferret out, who fits, who buys into the mission. And it's not about sort of drinking the Kool-Aid, it's about people having a passion to serving our residents extremely well, and that in all aspects of what they do.
Now just for these purposes, give us a sense of scale. How many units are you talking about in terms of what you're doing now?
We've been in Avanath Capital Management. We started in 2008, and we started doing our first acquisitions in 2010. And since then, we've acquired about 7,500 apartments. Wow. Units, about 37 properties. primarily California, Seattle to San Diego on the West Coast, New York City, which we've been active. We own about 200 units in Brooklyn, and we've been buying small buildings there, but we own from Brooklyn.
So I might have some family members
Yes,
that live in your
you
units?
may. We'd love to have your family. From Brooklyn to Naples, Florida, on the East Coast. And then we have a little bit, we own a property outside my hometown of Detroit, and we own a property in Dallas. But primarily we're on the two coasts. And we're in markets where, high-cost markets with strong needs for affordable housing. If you look across our portfolio, our average rent is about $1,100 a month.
Wow.
Which is
Is there
consistent.
an application that I can find?
Yes, please. We'd love to. I think you probably make too much. But $1,100, if you look at the median renter in the U.S., they make $35,000 a year. So, we continue to build these very high-end properties,
Right.
All targeting the Google millennial, when in reality, the need is really at the workforce level.
Gotcha. And so as you're thinking about these innovations and being creative, you're probably keeping you're sort of reading the tea leaves and trying to figure out where the market is going. What insights could you give us just about how you do that? Like, how do you keep abreast about what's going on and what's about to happen next?
Wow, that's a very, very, very good question. One of the things that helps, I try to walk our communities frequently. And not only walk the communities and just look at the physical thing, but I talk to people.
That's why you have your Fitbit 10,000
Yes,
steps?
yes, I do. Yeah, I do my
I got
walking.
mine too. So.
But a lot of times I'll wear, all of our maintenance techs wear a purple Avanath shirt, so I'll wear that. And you'll walk a property and you'll get stopped because people think you're a maintenance person, and they'll stop and they'll tell you what's going on, and they'll say, and there have been times people have stopped me and said, "Can you look at something in my apartment?" Sure, and I talk with them and I'll go look at whatever it is, and
now, have you ever fixed anything?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a hands-on business. That's just what we do. And you know what? There's nothing beneath me, and I think it's important for my maintenance techs to know that I appreciate what they do. But I think it's important to listen, to talk to people. I like to sit and to listen when I go to one of our properties and just hang out in the leasing office and listen to people come in and talk about, what they're interested in, where they work, or any problem they might have. But a lot of times it's just listening to your residents. You learn a lot. I mean, you certainly learn. One of the things you learn that a lot of people, even if they are a Section 8 resident, most of our Section 8 residents work.
Yeah.
And some of them work 2 jobs. And so you learn that people are working very, very hard today. And so that's one of the things you see some of the political, and I won't go into politics, but you see some of the discontent. And part of it is people are having to work harder and harder for the same amount of money today. And so those are things that, you get some sense of, and you also get a sense of some of the positives in the sense that, when people come in and say, I need, I'm having a baby, or I need more space, and those, a lot of things like that, or I'm moving because I'm buying a house because I got a promotion. You want to get a sense of all those things. I find that we're in Orlando, Florida. That's a place where there's just such great job growth there, and you get a sense of that because so many people come there and they say, "Oh, I just moved here to take a job."
Gotcha. So you mentioned babies and the like, and one of the ULI Global Next Group's challenges is we're in that moment where we're both growing our careers, but we're often in these sort of family evolution moments as well. And so How did you sort of navigate? You said you have a 12-year-old.
A 12 and a 13-year-old. So I'm still navigating it.
There you go.
That's
there you
it.
go.
I should have started in my 20s and 30s with kids. Then I would have had them in the 35 to 45 period. They would, so I have the 35 to 45-year-old kid ages now. But,
gotcha. So what's your current working hypothesis on how to balance?
Well, I try to be there I am there every weekend for my kids. I may travel probably 30 to 40% of the time, and that's during the week. But at that age, they've got their activity. So we come together on the weekends. And but the other thing I try to do in the summer is, which is a little bit of the luxury of, perhaps being my company, is I will take a kid with me on a trip to go when I'm going to look at properties, and for a couple of reasons. One, to get them a sense of what I do.
Right.
But second, so they can
Dad's
see.
a maintenance man.
Yeah, exactly. They have to pick up paper too. But the second thing is just that they get a sense of how, other people live differently than the way they do, and to have an appreciation for the diversity of incomes and cultures that exist in this country.
Now you're a plant, because my last question will be about diversity. And from my crack research team, apparently you're a black man.
Yes.
This is what my research team told me.
You're very good.
No, they're good. And we're maneuvering in a real estate industry that has some challenges when it comes to diversity. And so what thoughts do you have in terms of what we can do to all embrace diversity and build more Daryl Carters of the world and give them the opportunity to do what you did? Well,
it's an area that I've been committed personally, and my company, which I think is highly diverse amongst many, gender lines, et cetera, and ethnicity. But I think the industry can do a better job. And we, unfortunately, I hate to say it, I started 35 years ago. We've only gotten slightly better. And in fact, some ways we've taken some steps back. I think that it's important for the industry to try to build executives that look like, for instance, in the apartment industry, like our residents.
Right.
I've been very involved. I'm a past chairman of the National Multifamily Housing Council, and we have a significant diversity initiative there, which is trying to create, which we have CEO level people involved with. People like Rick Campo, who's the CEO of Camden, and Sue Ansell, who's the CEO of Gables. A number of very leading people who we try to get in the room and say, okay, what are we doing about your boards of director? What are we doing about, training and development? But it's an important thing, because I think part of our, it's one of those things I think the industry should embrace, but the little secret is part of our success and our returns are the fact that we do have a very diverse staff, meaning that
so it's not just a feel-good effort.
No, it's not a feel-good. It's, one of the reasons, we own properties in North Long Beach where there are lots of, we have the North Side Gangster Crips and we have the LBC Insane Crips. I've met with those guys and I said, hey, how do we make our community better? And, they look at me perhaps differently than others, and there's a blessed to be able to do that. But I think the diversity in our industry creates opportunities for us to interact with our communities in much more interesting ways than what I think is traditional in the industry. And that's part of thinking out the box and innovation.
Wow. Well, Daryl, thank you for your time, man.
Thank you.
Good talking to you.
I've enjoyed it.